Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we have another off-season preview video. This is going to be our 10th off-season preview video, gearing up for the 2026 off-season. And today's, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Dallas Stars, the next two teams who were eliminated in round one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. What went wrong for both of these teams? How are they shaping up going into the off-season? And what do they need to rectify in the off-season to make the playoffs and maybe get a little bit further next year? We'll touch on all of this coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. If you can, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, tell all your friends. Best hockey content on YouTube is right here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. So if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe. We're trying to hit 750 subscribers in the very near future. On top of that, don't forget to stay tuned for a live stream on Friday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time for Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Final with the chance to end the series. The Hurricanes up 3-1. That'll be at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, so I hope you guys are able to stay tuned for that one. And also don't forget to stay tuned for more videos in the very near future. But in today's video, we have our 10th off-season preview video of the off-season. So like we said, we're going to do Dallas and Pittsburgh here. We're going to first look at their stats from this past year, look at their goal and point scoring leaders, and 3 reasons I think these two teams missed the playoffs. We'll look at their significant pending UFAs, RFAs, as well as their draft capital. And I'll give you 3 ways I think these two teams can improve in the off-season to get better and maybe make it past round 1 next year. So we'll start here with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Last year, they finished with a record of 41, 25, and 16 for 98 points, which wasn't half bad. They ended up scoring 290 goals for, which was 3rd in the NHL. They did give up 258 goals against, which was 24th in the NHL. They had the 7th ranked power play with 24.1%, and they had the tied for 6th ranked penalty kill with an 81.4% PK. So that's not half bad. In the postseason, they had a 1.83 goals for per game, which was 14th in the NHL. They had 2.67 goals against per game, which was 5th. They had a 15.8% power play in the postseason, which was 11th. However, they did have an 88.2% PK unit, which was 4th in the entire NHL. So if you look at the regular season stats offensively, power play wise, great. Top 10 in both categories, or top 5 in the goal scoring department. So for a team that wasn't supposed to score very many goals this year, they actually did quite well in the regular season. And the penalty kill was also quite good as well, being tied for 6th best in the entire NHL. The goals against was a little bit bad, being 24th in the NHL, but they really did do a lot better in the postseason, being the 5th best goals against team in the postseason. And their penalty kill was once against a per, but their power play and their goal scoring really just went off and tailed off in the postseason. So that's not great stuff there for the Penguins. If you go over to their goal and point scoring leaders in the regular and postseason, in the regular season, Crosby led the way with 74 points, followed by Carlson, who had 66, and Rust, who had 65. And then goal scoring wise, Malfa led the team with 33 goals, followed by Crosby, who had 29, and Rust, who had 29. In the postseason, Malkin, Letang, and Dewar all led the way with 2 goals apiece. And in the points category, Crosby led the way with 5 points, followed by Raquel, who had 4, and Malkin and Carlson, who had 3. So if you look at the regular season stats, you can see where they were one of the best teams in the entire NHL. They didn't have a ton of high-level goal scorers and point getters. Malkin, the only guy who hit 30-plus goals, and Crosby, the only guy who hit 70-plus points. But they scored a lot from committee, so that was really good stuff there for the Penguins. In the postseason, you can definitely see why it dwindled a little bit. Crosby only had 5 points in 6 games, and that was the best, and only 2 guys had more than 3 points, and no one had 3 goals or more in the postseason for the Penguins. You can definitely see why their offense trailed off in the postseason, but those are the goal and point scoring leaders. Next, going over to 3 reasons I think this team got first rounded. The first one was their lethal offense stalled. Like we said, they had the 3rd best offense in the regular season, and it was looking phenomenal. And then in the postseason, Philadelphia's shutdown style defense really just hindered Pittsburgh's offense. They couldn't get anything going. Once again, Rust, Raquel, Crosby, they were decent and productive, but they weren't productive as they were in the regular season. And on top of that, they couldn't find that offensive gear that they found so many times in the regular season. So I think the biggest reason this Pittsburgh Penguins team was not able to make it to round 2 is the fact that they could not get any offense going in that round 1 series. The second reason was their power play couldn't get going either. Like, they had the 11th ranked power play, and I think for a long stretch of time in that first round series against Philadelphia, they had gone like 2 or 3 games without a power play goal. So like, it wasn't overly good. The power play wasn't clicking for Pittsburgh, and they do have a couple of really solid weapons on that power play unit, like Carlson, like Crosby, like Malkin. So it's not really great to see that the power power play wasn't going, and that's another reason why I think they wound up getting first rounded. And the third reason was Skinner wasn't great. Skinner started the first 3 games for the Pittsburgh Penguins in that first round series against Philadelphia. He went 0-3. Seelovs came back in and he went 2-1. So even though they did lose the series, Seelovs was a lot better. I think Skinner had like a sub 880 save percentage and above 3 GAA or something like that. Like, it was not overly good numbers for Stuart Skinner. So once again, I think starting Skinner to begin the playoffs and not Seelovs was a big problem for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Skinner's playing those sorts of games really did them in. So in my opinion, the lethal offense stalling, the power play not being able to get going, and Skinner not playing great were the 3 main reasons, in my opinion, this Pittsburgh Penguins team was eliminated in round 1. Next, going over to their UFAs, RFAs, and their draft capital. So first, when it comes to their projected cap for this upcoming season, they have a projected $66.14 million in cap, which actually isn't half bad because that leaves them with about $37.86 million in cap space, and this is after them signing Evgeny Malkin. So the Penguins have a ton of cap space to work with for this offseason. When it comes to their UFAs, they have Kevin Hayes, Anthony Mantha, Noel Acciari, Bork Johnny Mama, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Ryan Shea, Connor Clifton, and Stuart Skinner. So once again, Hayes, I think, is very likely to get moved. He was a healthy scratch a whole bunch of times. It sounds like Mantha, even though Penguins want to bring him back, wants to test free agency. So as much as I think Pittsburgh wants to bring him back in like a 1 to 2 year deal, I think there's a very likely chance he winds up testing free agency. I think Acciari tests free agency too. Has been a decent bottom 6-4, but I think he'll go to a place where he can have a little bit more of a better chance to win a Stanley Cup. And Mama, Pinard, they're both depth guys. I don't think they'll be brought back. Clifton was a depth guy, a little bit overpaid. He was acquired as a bad contract a couple years ago. I don't think he gets brought back. Stuart Skinner was a decent goaltender after being acquired in December from the Edmonton Oilers, but I think they probably could go in a couple of different directions. They also have some really good goaltenders coming up in Blomqvist and Marushov, so I don't think Pittsburgh's going to bring Skinner back. The one I think is most likely to potentially be brought back is Ryan Shea. He had 6 goals and 35 points in 8 games. Really started to round out to a really solid top 4 defenseman. So I wouldn't be shocked if Shea got a little bit of a longer term deal and avoided free agency. So I think for the most part, most of these UFAs are going to leave except for Shea, maybe Mantha, maybe Acciari. So very interesting to note there. On the RFA side, they got Chinakhov, Koivunen, Alexiev, Seelovs, and Blomqvist. Now I think Koivunen and Alexiev could potentially not be qualified. I wouldn't be shocked if they were brought back on 1 year or 2 year cheap deals, but I don't think there's any guarantees that those guys are going to be qualified. Chinakhov, I think, is definitely going to be extended. He's got 21 goals, 42 points in 72 games with Columbus and Pittsburgh combined. And Pittsburgh, he looked phenomenal. Really stellar top 6 forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins after the acquisition. So I think he'll definitely get a contract extension. And then you got Seelovs and Blomqvist. They both have pretty decent seasons. Blomqvist at the AHL level, Seelovs at the NHL level. I expect both those guys to be brought back too. Not sure if both of them will be the 1-2 punch in net on the NHL squad, but I do think there's a relatively chance both of them will remain in the Pittsburgh organization. So I do think most of the Penguins pending RFAs will stay with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to the Penguins' current draft capital for this upcoming 2026 season. So for the Penguins, they have a current amount of draft capital and 5 draft picks. It's not a whole bunch. They have their own first, they have the Jets and their own second, they have their own third, they have no fourth, no 5th, the Preds 6th, and no 7th. So they have no 4th, 5th, or 7th round picks. And once again, they do have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, which for a team who made the playoffs is not terrible. But once again, 5 picks isn't overly ideal for a team who only won 2 playoff games this year. So very interesting note there, but the Penguins, they do have a couple of high-end picks, and they're going to be able to utilize that, but just not as much as I think I would like to see the Pittsburgh Penguins have. And they might be able to acquire a couple before the actual draft happens, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to 3 things I think the Penguins should do in the offseason to get better and improve for next year. The first thing has to be start moving off some of their veterans. They had a really good season this year. I could see them potentially go to the postseason next year with how weak the Metro Division is, but I think they really got to start on their retool. They did bring in a couple of younger players in season last year, which really worked out well for them, but I think moving off a couple of their veterans would be a smart move there for the Penguins. You have Russ and Raquel, who both have 2 years left on their deals, really solid top 6 guys on pretty dang good cost control deals. I could see if there was enough of an asking price, either one of those two guys get moved. Justin Brazeau, Thomas Novak, both entering the final year of their deals. If there's no long-term interest for the Pittsburgh Penguins to sign either of those two guys, I think you gotta consider trading either one of those ones. Carlson's another one, and so is Sam Girard on the defensive end. Both are also entering the final year of their deals. If they don't think they can sign them to extensions, and if they think there's a likely chance they walk in free agency next year, then you gotta try and sign those guys to extensions too. So I'm not exactly sure exactly how many veterans they move, but I think at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 veterans need to be moved by Pittsburgh Penguins this offseason to start off the really big portion of this retool. The second thing this team should do is to leave some open spots for younger players. They have some pretty good prospects coming in, and I think if you left 1 to 2 spots in the forward group, maybe a spot on the defensive end opened for some of those younger guys to sort of grab the roster spots, sort of like a Benjamin Kindell did this year, I think that would be a very smart move there for Pittsburgh. I'm looking at guys like Tristan Braz, Tanner Howe, Owen Pickering, Harrison Brunick, or Jesper Blomqvist. I think all those guys have some very good options to potentially make a crack at the NHL team next year. Howe and Braz I think could be really decent top 9 forwards. Pickering and Brunick I think could at least be decent third pair defensemen, and I think Blomqvist has the potential to be a really solid backup. So I'm not exactly sure who they're going to try and put in, but I think leaving a couple of roster spots open on their roster entering training camp for their younger players would be a smart move there for the Penguins. And the third thing this team should do is to move some picks and prospects to add 1 to 2 more younger players. We saw the Penguins do this in season when they moved a second and third round pick to acquire Igor Chinnikov. They moved a third round pick to acquire Elmer Soderblom. I think they should continue to do that, whether that's in a deal with one of their veterans, whether that's combining picks and prospects. They have a couple of really good picks over the next couple of years. They have some decent prospects. Package some of those ones for maybe a younger player who's not doing overly well in his current club. I think might be a smart move there for the Penguins. Once again, not exactly sure who they could try and target, because I do think Pittsburgh's going to be through like a 2 to 3 year retool. So someone who's on a lower end contract or getting up there in age, I don't think will be smart for Pittsburgh. But if they can add a couple more younger pieces this offseason and move picks and prospects or other veterans to get that, I think that would be a very smart move there for the Penguins. So in my opinion, continuing moving off vets, leaving a couple of roster spots open for younger players, as well as trying to move picks and prospects to add some younger pieces to this team, I think will be some smart moves there for the Penguins. And like I said, even if they were to move veterans like Rust or Raquel or Carlson, because of the weakness of the Metro Division, I think if they did right retool and they brought in a couple of younger players, did some right moves in free agency, I could still see this team be a playoff team. I think they are poised for a step back next year, sort of like I said with a couple of other teams, but I do think that Pittsburgh, if they made the right moves, could still be a playoff team. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But let's head over now to the Dallas Stars. Now, when it comes to the Dallas Stars, they had a pretty dang good season last year. They finished with a 50, 20, and 12 record for 112 points, which I think was like 3rd or 4th in the entire NHL. Like, they had a great season this past year. Goal scoring wise, 273 goals for, 9th in the NHL. Goals against wise, 222 goals against, 2nd best in the entire NHL. Power play, 28.6%, 2nd best in the regular season, and penalty kill was at 80.3%, which was 13th in the NHL in the regular season. In the postseason, they had 2.50 goals for per game, which was 10th in the NHL. They had 3.83 goals against per game, which was tied for 14th in the NHL. They had a 40% power play unit, which was 1st in the postseason, and they had an 84% PK unit, which was 8th in the postseason. So in the regular season, there was no bad stats for the Dallas Stars. You could say that the penalty kill being 13th in the NHL was a little suboptimal, but besides that, every other stat they had was top 10, including the 2nd best goals against and the 2nd best power play, which is something to be very proud of. And then the postseason, definitely a little bit lackluster. Special teams was still pretty good. The penalty kills about average. They had the best power play in the postseason. However, goal scoring wise, they were 10th. Goals against wise, they were one of the worst teams in the postseason. So all in all, it wasn't fantastic in the postseason, but they definitely did have a really good regular season. Next, going over to their goal and point scoring leaders. When it comes to their point leaders in the regular season, Robertson led the way with 96 points, followed by Johnston, who had 86, and Rantanen, who had 77. Robertson and Johnston were tied for the team leading goal scoring with 45, followed by Mikko Rantanen, who had 22, so quite a drop off from 2 to 3. Then the postseason, Duchesne led the way with 9 points, followed by Robertson, who had 8, and Rantanen, who had 7. And Robertson led the way with 5 goals, followed by Johnson, who had 4, and Duchesne and Heiskanen, who were tied for 2. So once again, if you look at their goal scoring and point scoring in the postseason and the regular season, they had a couple of really solid players get some really high point totals, like Robertson, Johnston, and Rantanen. Once again, you probably want to see them have at least a couple more 25, 30 plus goal scorers, rather than just have 2 45 plus guys and then basically have no one else at the 20 goal mark. Rantanen did have 22, but once again, you want to see it have a little bit better stats there for the Stars. And in the postseason, like Duchesne, Robertson, Rantanen, like they were the point drivers and all had pretty dang good postseasons. But there was just no depth scoring in that thing. I mean, like only 4 guys had more than 1 goal in the postseason in a 6-game series against Minnesota. Like that's not obviously something you want to see if you're the Dallas Stars. So very interesting note there, but those are the point and goal scoring leaders. When it comes to the 3 reasons I think they got eliminated in round 1, the first one was the 5v5 offense was a no-show. I think they had 2 or 3 5-on-5 goals in their entire 6-game series against the Minnesota Wild. That series would have been done in 4 or 5 games if not for the Dallas Stars power play, which was superb in the postseason. But once again, because of that 5v5 offense, that in my opinion is just the clear-cut reason this team didn't make it to round 2. Like if they had a little bit of a better 5-on-5 unit along with their lethal power play unit, maybe they beat Minnesota, but they didn't. It was terrible, and that is a huge reason as to why Dallas Stars lost to Minnesota Wild. The second reason, in my opinion, was the lack of depth scoring. Once again, I think there were only 5 or 6 players in this series that actually scored a goal for the Dallas Stars. Like, it wasn't a whole bunch. Like, sure, Robertson had a really solid series. Sure, Johnson had a really solid series, and there were definitely a couple of other guys who scored some goals, but it was not a long list of guys who scored goals for the Dallas Stars in this series. Like, it was not overly good. So, once again, I think the depth scoring was a bad reason as to why this Dallas Stars team was eliminated in round 1. And the third reason was the defense in the postseason was worse than it was in the regular season. Now, in the regular season, Dallas had the second best defensive unit. They were top 3. They were a sound defensive team. In the postseason, they had one of the worst defenses in the entire NHL. Andre didn't play overly well. The defense, once again, Heiskanen wasn't at 100%. But even after that, like, they scratched Tyler Myers at some points. Ilya Bushkin didn't look overly well, and they could not get anything going defensively. So in my opinion, the 5-on-5 offense being a no-show, depth scoring not being there for the Dallas Stars, and the defense being worse than it was in the regular season were the 3 main reasons, in my opinion, this Dallas Stars team did not make it out round 1 this year. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to their UFAs, RFAs, and their draft capital. So when it comes first to their projected cap, they don't have a lot of cap space. They have a projected cap of about $93.86 million for this upcoming offseason, which leaves them with $10.14 million in cap space. With the business they need to attend to this offseason, that's not going to be enough. So very interesting to note there. When it comes to their UFAs, they have Ben, Ernie, Bunting, Bastian, Lind, and Petrovic. Now, Lind, Petrovic to some extent, Bastian to some extent, as well as Ernie. I think we're all depth guys. Like, some of them had more NHL time than others, but I wouldn't be surprised if all of those guys left. Bastian, I think, could still be a bomb 6 forward. So could Ernie. Petrovic can be a decent depth defenseman, and Lind could be a decent depth forward. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe 1 or 2 of them were back on, like, short-term deals, but I think most of those guys leave. Jamie Benn could potentially be back. He's getting up there in age. He was on a 1-year contract this past season. I do wonder if he signs like a 1-year extension to remain back in Dallas, but I also wonder if the Dallas Stars just decide to walk away from him. And then you've also got Michael Bunting, who was acquired at the trade deadline, having 14 goals and 33 points in 74 games. I think he was actually scratched a couple of times for Dallas Stars in that postseason too. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if Bunting tried to look for opportunities elsewhere. Maybe he signs like a 2 to 3 year deal to remain in the Stars middle 6, but I think at this point in time it'd be more likely that he winds up leaving. So very interesting note there, but those are their pending UFAs. When it comes to their pending RFAs, they have Jason Robertson, Maverick Bourque, Hugh, Stranges, McDonald, Semenov, Kolya Chinook, and Poirier. Now, most of these guys are AHL guys. Stranges, McDonald, Semenov, and Poirier all played AHL minutes. They don't think any of them gone to any NHL action. So I think they're all probably sound like lower-end deals. I still think Poirier could be a decent third-pair defenseman, and Stranges, McDonald, and Semenov I think could all still have potential potential of being decent depth forwards. So I think there's a really good chance they all get brought back. Khalil Chinook had 1 goal, 9 points in 34 AHL games, got a couple of stints at the NHL level, but I think there's a really good chance he probably winds up not being qualified. When it comes to Huru, he had 9 goals and 19 points in 27 AHL games. Also had a really good stint at the NHL level towards the end of the season, got some playoff time. I think there's a really good chance he gets brought back. And then you got Bork and Robertson. These two guys are not going to be just not qualified. They're either going to be traded or going to be signed. It depends on how much they want and things like that, but Robertson's a huge piece of that team, and Bork just put up a 41-point season. So I think they're either going to be traded or they're going to be re-signed, but I don't think they're going to be just not qualified. But those are the RFAs for the Dallas Stars. Next, going over to the Stars' current draft capital. When you look at the Dallas Stars' current draft capital for the upcoming 2026 draft, they don't have a lot of picks. Just like the Pittsburgh Penguins, they only have 5 picks for this upcoming draft, and it's a lot worse than the Penguins situation. They have no first, they have their own second, they have no third, they have no fourth, they have their own fifth, their own 6th, and the Toronto Maple Leafs 7th. So they do have 4 picks in the last 3 rounds, which isn't terrible, but they have 1 pick in the first 4 rounds, which, once again, they made the playoffs. For a team who got first round, though, you want to see them have at least a little bit more draft capital, especially in the first few rounds. So very interesting to note there, but Dallas is definitely without some draft capital right now, and once again, they could potentially try and reacquire some before this year's draft, but for now, it's not looking overly good for Dallas having a whole bunch of draft capital. So very interesting note there. And lastly here, going over to the 3 things I think this team should look at in the offseason to get better and improve for next year. The first thing I think this team needs to do is to figure out that Robertson situation. There's been a lot of speculation about Robertson over the past couple of years. He's an RFA, so once again, the Stars do have control over his contract. It sounds like he wants $12 million on the Rantanen contract. Now, this team currently has $10 million in cap space. And if they move 2 bodies out, they might be able to get up to $15 million in cap space. They don't have a ton of cap space. So they got to make a decision here. Do they A, sign Robertson and basically hinder themselves from making basically any other moves to upgrade this team? Or 2, do you trade one of the best goal scorers you've had over the past couple of years? So it's a decision that they're going to have to make. I don't know which way they're leading at this point in time, but it's the biggest priority in my opinion. Figure out the Robertson situation. Are you keeping him and signing him to a long-term extension that he wants, $12 to $13 million? Or are you trading him, trying to recoup as many assets as you can and using that money elsewhere? It's a very big question, but it's the biggest question the Stars team needs to figure out this offseason. The second thing I think this team needs to do is move out some cap. Like I said, even if they do trade Robertson, they're going to need to bring in some players this year because they do have some holes on their lineup and they don't still have a whole bunch of cap. So whether that's a guy like Radek Faksa, whether that's a guy like Sam Steele, whether that's a guy like Ilya Lyubushkin, they need to move out some cap. I think Faksa makes some sense. They can probably get cheaper options at the 4th line center spot. Lyubushkin's making $2.75 million. I think they can do without a $3 million third pair defenseman. Steele's a little bit more of a guy who I could see stay, but he's also making $2.1 million and is a very decent middle 6 forward. So I'm not exactly sure who they want to get moved, but they gotta free up some cap space some way to get a little bit more wiggle room under that cap to make some more moves this offseason. So in my opinion, priority number 2 has to move out some contracts that have some bigger cap on them. And the third thing I think this team should do is to add 2 to 3 more depth forwards. They're probably going to be losing a couple of depth forwards this offseason with guys like Bunting and Ernie and Bastian. So once again, they're probably going to try and go after some of the cheaper options with their limited amount of cap space. But I think going after a couple of 3rd or 4th liners maybe in free agency wouldn't be a half bad idea. Guys that come to mind would be like a Ross Johnston in Anaheim, or Danton Heinen in Columbus, or Oscar Sundqvist in St. Louis, who are all heading for free agency right now. So once again, I'm not exactly sure who they target, but I think they have to try and rework that bottom 6, especially after the lackluster performance of that bottom 6 in the postseason this year. So in my opinion, it's the 3 priorities for the Stars entering this offseason is 1, sign Jason Robertson or trade Jason Robertson, but figure out that situation. 2, move some cap out, whether that's Faksa, Lyubushkin, that's Steele, move some players around to free up some cap space. And the third thing this team needs to do is to try and add some more depth players to rework that bottom 6. And I do think Dallas could still be a playoff team. Now, I do think they could be poised for a little bit of a step backwards, especially if they trade Robertson or if they signed Robertson and didn't bring in basically anyone else. So I think they could be in a little bit of a cap bind, and I think that could lead them to having a little bit of regression. But I think if they are able to figure out some creative way to sign Robertson and still add some pieces, I think they could definitely still be a playoff team next year. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Dallas Stars and the Pittsburgh Penguins? Are you surprised that these two teams were first rounded? What do you think they can do in the offseason? And do you think they can do the necessary steps to make it back to the postseason next year? We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video. If you're related to subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. We'd never be able to do this with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and tell all your friends the best hockey content on YouTube is right here at the End to End Hockey channel. Also, don't forget to stay tuned for my live stream on Friday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time for Game 5 of Hurricanes and Habs. That'll be a very interesting one. Hope you guys are able to stay tuned for that one. Also, don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I also do a blog, tell me news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. Link into that in the description below. And can't wait to see you guys all for next video. God bless y'all. I'll see y'all on the next one.